Welcome to the Orchard Online. My name is Aston Kank, and we are so happy you are here with us today. If this is your first time watching, we are so excited to have you. We do have someone that is ready to connect with you in the comments below, so be sure to leave your name. If you have any prayer requests, whatever it is, we want to connect with you. We're so excited about our sermon today. We're going to be jumping into week 2 of our Advent series, which is on peace. So here's Pastor Matt.
So what comes to mind when you think about the word peace? When I say peace, what is it that maybe it's a certain image or it's a place or it's a feeling that floods your mind? Maybe for you, it's that time of the year where you go on vacation, whether it be a summer vacation, a winter or a fall vacation. Maybe for you, when you think about peace, that peace is that getaway where life slows down. Or maybe when you hear that word peace, you think about on a global scale, this idea of world peace where nations cease to fight, where nations get along and they're not arguing over trade deals or territories. It's this idea of peace between nations. I think if we're being honest, though, most of our considerations of peace are temporary. And what we mean is that vacations are nice, but they're just temporary breaks from reality. That nations cease fighting, but in the background, the animosity remains. That although nations may not be technically at war with each other, they are still scheming behind the scenes because deep down, and sometimes not even hidden, but very publicly, they know that they do not get along with their neighbors or surrounding nations. I think for us, this time of the year that we are entering into and have begun is this Advent season. And last week, Pastor Eddie, he reminded us that Advent is a season of hope, but today I want us to understand that Advent is also a season of peace. And we celebrate this Advent, and if you didn't catch it last week, I'd encourage you to go back and watch week 1. But Advent, if you're unfamiliar with the term, Advent is from a Latin word that means coming or arrival. And we use it to describe this season, oftentimes called Christmas, because Advent was this coming or this arrival of the promised Messiah. We often read about this in Luke's Gospel, in Luke chapter 2, or in Matthew's Gospel, where this baby known as Jesus was born in Bethlehem and he entered into the world. And Advent, this season of preparation where we look back on the coming and the arrival of this promised Messiah, is a season of peace. And Jesus' first coming was announced with a proclamation of peace. In Luke's Gospel, we just mentioned, the shepherds are out in the fields and all of a sudden a multitude of angels appear around them and they begin to proclaim this message of peace. In Luke chapter 2, verse 14, this is what we read. These angels begin to declare glory to God in the highest heaven and peace on earth to people he favors. But sometimes, if we're honest, Advent or Christmas this season, or maybe life in general, doesn't feel so peaceful. For us, peace feels good for a moment, but it doesn't last. Or does it? I want to invite you at this time, we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 11. Now, we began this Advent series last week in Isaiah chapter 2, and the stage was set for us where Isaiah is prophesying to the people of God who, in many ways, had rebelled against God. They had turned their backs on God. And so for context, between Isaiah chapter 2 and Isaiah chapter 11, I want to kind of catch you up to speed to some of the things that Isaiah talks about. Prior to Isaiah chapter 11, this is what Isaiah declares. He declares that Judah has rebelled against God, and because of her sin, they are in danger of God's judgment. He declares to them that God will raise up a foreign nation known as the Assyrians to judge Judah and specifically Jerusalem, this seat, this location of the temple, the heartbeat of this nation. And he says to Judah that because of their hardness of heart, because of their rejection of God and his prophet's message, that Judah and Jerusalem both will be destroyed. Like a large tree, Judah will be cut down. Her men will be slain. These are Isaiah's words. Her women will have their heads shaved. They will be embarrassed and they will be ashamed. They will dress themselves in sackcloth, and her walls will be destroyed. A remnant then will return to the land, that not all is doom and gloom, that yes, this judgment will occur, but in the years after and in the days after, that there will be a remnant, a portion of the people who will be able to return to this desolate land. And not only that, there walls will be rebuilt. The city, to an extent, will be rebuilt. Its walls will be rebuilt. And then Isaiah in chapter 9 says this, that also a child will be born. And one of the descriptions about this specific child that will be born is he said, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will reign on the throne of David now and forever. So there's a bit of a mixed bag here in Isaiah's messaging, that he proposes and he prophesies and he foreshadows this impending judgment that will take place in the nation of Judah, that her walls will be destroyed, that her pride and joy, Jerusalem, will be cut down like a tree, and that his kingdom will be no more. And yet there is a bit of hope, and we talked about this last week, that this is not the end of Judah forever, because there will be coming in years to come, a remnant will return and a child will be born, and this child is a child of hope. Ironically, Judah as a nation will be destroyed, and because Judah will cease to exist, the lineage of David, the king of Israel, whose lineage began to sit on the throne and rule and reign this nation of Judah, they will be cut off. But we get to Isaiah chapter 11, and this is what we read. Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 1, then a shoot will grow from the stump of Jesse. So the image that Isaiah has painted in the 11 chapters leading up to this, or the 10 chapters leading up to this, is that Judah, because of her hardness of heart, because of her rebellion, because of her sin, will be cut down like a tree. That's the image that he paints. But then there is hope beyond that. In Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 1, Isaiah again paints the picture. He says, there's a stump here known as Judah, but from that stump will grow a shoot. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but you can actually Google it. And trees are so created that you can cut down a tree, but within the DNA structure of that tree, from a stump, a shoot will spring forth. And that shoot is a tree trying to regrow itself, because in the DNA of the tree is this self-preservation to where, because you can cut down a tree, it will begin to regrow itself. And that's the picture that Isaiah paints. He says that Judah will be destroyed, that the nation will cease to exist, that David's throne for a time will cease to exist because they will be conquered and ruled by foreign nations. But there is hope. And the hope is that a shoot will spring forth from the stump of Jesse, Jesse being David's dad, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. What Isaiah is proclaiming is what we celebrate at Christmas. That there is coming a child known as Jesus, referred to as Emmanuel. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 9, he speaks to this coming child as Emmanuel, God with us. And in Matthew's gospel, Matthew identifies this baby, Jesus, who has been born to Mary and Joseph, born in Bethlehem, as the fulfillment of what Isaiah foresaw. This Jesus, this coming Messiah, Emmanuel, would be of the lineage of David, and he would come to establish his kingdom. And that's one of the things that we celebrate at Christmas, that Jesus' first advent, his first coming, that when he arrived, he is fulfilling what Isaiah foresaw. That though Judah would cease to exist, though her walls would be torn down, though she would be destroyed, that through this remnant, God's hope remains, his promises remain, and that one day coming, there would be a shoot that springs up. And we see that this shoot is Jesus. And when Jesus arrived on the scene that first Christmas morning, he came to establish his kingdom. He came to fulfill God's plan of redemption for all of creation. But we see that when Jesus came to establish his kingdom would be very different from the kingdoms that Judah was used to. Go all the way back to Isaiah chapter 1. This was the kingdom, this was the culture, this was the setting in which Judah was used to. Judah had turned her back on the Lord in rebellion and in sin. Judah was known and indicted as being doers of evil in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 16. Judah was known as her leaders for perverting justice in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 17. And so what we know is that this shoot will spring up, and Jesus arrived on the scene and he established his kingdom on this earth, not in its entirety, but he introduced his kingdom to the earth. And what Isaiah describes in verses 2 through 4 is that this kingdom will be vastly different from the kingdom that Judah was used to. Look in verse 2, Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 2. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. This is the shoot that springs forth from the stump. And when this shoot comes from the descendants of David, this is the type of kingdom that this offspring will bring. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. A spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and strength, a spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. His delight will be in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes. He will not execute justice by what he hears with his ears, but he will judge the poor righteously and execute justice for the oppressed of the land. Judah was known for turning her back on the Lord, as being known as doers of evil, as being known for being perverters of justice. And yet this kingdom that will be established is described as being marked by the knowledge and fear of the Lord. Rather than turning away from the instruction of the Lord, it will be marked by the knowledge and fear of the Lord as part of its top priority. This kingdom will be ruled by righteousness because there will be a righteous ruler who sits on the throne. This kingdom will be evidenced by justice, where no longer does injustice prevail, but instead justice goes forth. This kingdom will be vastly different from the kingdom that Judah is used to. Isaiah goes on to describe this type of ruler that we know as Jesus, who will establish his kingdom. And he says that he will strike the land with a scepter from his mouth, and he will kill the wicked with a command from his lips. The type of peace that will rule this nation and this kingdom that is proclaimed by the angels in Luke chapter 2, that peace has come, that peace to the earth. This type of peace comes at a cost. And we see this described by Isaiah. True and total peace cannot coincide with wickedness. So when Jesus comes to establish his kingdom once and for all, it will be marked by peace because there will be a righteous ruler who sits on the throne, who executes justice. But we see that he will also wipe out evil and wickedness from the land. He will kill the wicked with a command from his lips. The hope of peace that one day will come when Jesus' kingdom is once and for all established in its finality should serve as a warning to us. And the warning is this, that in order for Jesus to establish his kingdom completely and forever, he must abolish wickedness. The warning is that Jesus will not tolerate evil and wickedness forever. But because of this impending judgment where evil and wickedness is once and for all wiped out, the result is peace. Not the kind of peace that we thought about in the very beginning of a temporary vacation and we break from reality, or a temporary truce between nations. No, when Jesus establishes his kingdom and he rules in righteousness and he establishes justice, he will also wipe out evil and wickedness. And the result of a kingdom that is ruled by righteousness and desolate of wickedness is a kingdom of total peace, a kingdom of lasting peace. There's coming a day when Jesus comes back, his second advent, his second coming. There's coming a day when we will live under the rule and the reign of the Prince of Peace. And Isaiah, in the remaining verses that we'll look at today, describes what that day will be like. What it will be like to live and to be a part of Jesus' kingdom forever. He says in verse 5, righteousness will be a belt around his hips. Faithfulness will be a belt around his waist. That's because we now live under the rule and the reign of the one who is the Prince of Peace, Jesus, Emmanuel. And he goes on to describe the utter peace that is in the DNA of this kingdom. Verse 6. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the young lion and the fattened calf will be together, and a child will lead them. The cow and the bear will graze. Their young ones will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like cattle. An infant will play beside the cobra's pit, and a toddler will put his hand into the snake's den. They will not harm or destroy each other on my entire holy mountain, for the land will be as full of the knowledge of the Lord as the sea is filled with water. On that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will look to him for guidance, and his resting place will be glorious. Now, when you read about this coming shoot who will emerge from the stump of Jesse, that Judah would be cut down and judged, but yet there would be a coming hope and a fulfillment that would come, known as Jesus, who would establish his kingdom once and for all. And at his first coming, he came and introduced that kingdom. At his second coming, he will establish this kingdom for all of eternity. And Isaiah describes what that kingdom will be like. And the reality is this, that kingdom will be a kingdom of utter and total peace, not a temporary peace, but a lasting peace for all of eternity. So much so that these animals that are natural enemies in the world today will lie down together. They will play together. They will be in harmony with each other. So much so that an infant can play beside the pit of a cobra, that he will put his hand into the snake's den without fear of being bitten. And I think for many of us, we read that and we hear that and we're a bit skeptical. But here's what I would remind us is that peace is the byproduct of trust. Peace is the outward demonstration of this inner trust. How else could the lion and the lamb lay down next to each other and actually rest? It's because inside there's a total trust that results in the ability to rest. These natural enemies would then lay down and the lamb would lay next to the lion without fear of being eaten in the middle of the night. Why? Because peace is the byproduct of trust. And so fundamental a change will take place in this kingdom that natural enemies will lay down next to each other, where children can put their hand into the pit of venomous snakes and not be bitten. Why? Because peace is the byproduct of trust. And because Jesus rules and reigns and he sits on his righteous throne, that peace will be the characteristic of this kingdom, but it's fueled by a trust in who this king and this righteous Prince of Peace is. But here's the question that I would ask. Is this type of peace mere rhetoric? I think for many of us, when we think about peace, we may think of a Hallmark Christmas movie. And it feels really good, nestled up next to a fire with a cup of hot coffee or a cup of hot chocolate. But then that Hallmark movie doesn't last beyond our meeting tomorrow morning at work, where the chaos and the busyness of life ensues. I think for us, we read these words in Isaiah and we think that's a cute picture of a lion and a lamb resting next to each other. But if we're being honest, we're a bit skeptical that that reality can happen. In our minds, maybe it's no different than a Hallmark Christmas movie where it feels good for a time, but it doesn't last. Here's what I would say. Is that Advent, this time of the year that we celebrate Advent, this Christmas season, reminds us that ultimate peace is rooted in the person and the work of Jesus. That this type of peace is the byproduct of trust. And because Jesus is at the helm, because Jesus is the one ruling and reigning on his throne for all of eternity in this kingdom, that peace does not have to be a figment of our imagination, nor does it have to be temporary. Because peace doesn't come from a change in circumstances, it comes from a change of heart. And this type of heart change, this type of fundamental, down to the core change happens because of who Jesus is and what he has done. So I would encourage us to meet our skepticism with the truth and the reality of who Jesus is. And we know that Jesus does make this type of peace one day possible because he's already done it inside of us. Now, I know that Jesus came and he was born, and it was announced in Luke chapter 2 with this proclamation of peace. And yet 2,000 years later, we turn on the evening news and we see all of the turmoil in the Middle East. We see Russia and Ukraine constantly fighting and going to war for over 2 years now. And we see these things and we're like, man, it seems too good to be true. Because we live in a world that is not characterized by peace. But Isaiah reminds us that coming at Jesus' second advent, that one day when Jesus arrives on the scene again, he will establish his kingdom for all of eternity, and that he will sit and he will rule and reign on his throne, and that he will rule with righteousness. And he will abolish wickedness. So that this type of everlasting peace is made possible, but it's made possible because of who Jesus is. That rooted in his character is the ability to rule with utter righteousness and willing to rule with utter justice, that justice would prevail. But we see that Jesus also has power over sin and evil and wickedness, and that he, because of who he is, will abolish wickedness. We know that Jesus makes this type of peace possible, and he's already done it in us. We trust, because peace is a byproduct of trust, we trust that this type of eternal, everlasting peace is possible because Jesus can eradicate evil, that evil does not stand a chance against the power and the authority of Jesus. And we can trust that he is a good and righteous king, that peace is the byproduct for all of eternity because of who Jesus is. That our peace comes from trusting that Jesus is good, that he is righteous, and that when he sits on his throne, he will rule his kingdom with utter righteousness. So as we watch the evening news, as we run the rat race that is the Christmas season, where we go from party to party, festivity to festivity, where we try to get all of our presents ordered and shipped on time and wrapped and put under the tree, I would remind us in this Advent season, when things maybe don't seem peaceful, that peace is possible because of who Jesus is. That one day coming, when Jesus comes back, he will establish his kingdom. It says his kingdom will be marked by peace, not temporarily, but for all of eternity. Because this Jesus will sit and rule and reign. This Prince of Peace will sit on the throne, and he will establish righteousness in his kingdom, and he will utterly obliterate evil and wickedness. So this Advent season, will we be reminded that Jesus' first advent, his first coming, came with an announcement of peace, and his second coming will come with an establishment of peace, not temporarily, but for all of eternity. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this reminder that when we look at a world that is far beyond peaceful, we're reminded of the hope that we have of a coming kingdom that will be established in peace and righteousness, where peace will not be this fleeting desire that we long for, that we book for a week every year in our calendar, but that peace will be the hallmark of your kingdom, because at the helm of your kingdom is the King of Kings and the Prince of Peace, who sits and rules and reigns on his throne. It's because of who Jesus is that this type of peace is possible. And I pray, Lord, that during this Advent season, our eyes would be fixed on Jesus, so that we are reminded that this type of peace is possible because of who Jesus is, what he has done, and what he will do when he returns. We love you. We thank you. We ask that this type of peace would fill us in the midst of tumultuous circumstances that we live in today, and that we would find hope and encouragement, because this type of peace is one day coming to those who love and follow Jesus. We love you. We thank you. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Wow, what a great reminder that peace is a byproduct of trust, and how we as believers can only have peace through Jesus. Again, thanks for checking us out today. Online is a small glimpse of who we are at the Orchard. So if you can, check us out at one of our locations next week, whether that's Lake City, Live Oak, or Brantford. But if not, we'll be right back here next week. Have a great week.